First of all, thank you for joining me again.
Yeah, great
here
to see
in
you.
Seattle. It's a little rainier than last time, but
yeah,
it's good to be here
This is
still.
more typical in this time of year.
I believe it. So last time we chatted, it was 2019. I feel like 2020, do you have any New Year's resolutions or things you focus on at the beginning of a new decade?
Well, this year I'm going to travel a little bit less than normal.
The theme of the annual letter last year, which is why we spoke, was surprises. And so I read the annual letter for 2020, and I'll link it below if anyone wants to check it out. But the theme was swing for the fences. So how does that different for you this year? How does that look as a strategy and as an overall plan for you?
Well, this annual letter, we kind of took the 20-year perspective because it's our anniversary. We got going all the way back in the year 2000 and had, dreams of having huge impact in U.S. education and in global health. With global health, because of some new vaccines that we've been involved with and those have really gotten out, we, swung for the fences there and actually it succeeded. Education's been a lot tougher where, although we've done some good curriculum and done some things for tutoring and kids getting feedback, we don't have the dropout rate, the graduation preparedness. Still, the system is not dramatically improved and nowhere near as good as we want it to be.
Right. And I feel like you always seem to swing for the fences in general. It's just sort of a new way of framing it. But I have to ask, if you are swinging for the fences, what if you miss?
Well, hopefully you get more than one swing.
Is that fair? Yeah.
Either at the same problem, like multiple malaria vaccine constructs, so that if you have two or three, the combined chance of success is much higher, or that you're working in multiple areas, not just one area.
Right.
In climate, for example, I have a company that's trying to make a nuclear reactor that would be very cheap and that would have safety so that the public would be very accepting of it.
Yeah.
Now, even I realize that's high risk, less than 50% chance all that comes together. And yet, if it did, and the only reason I'm involved is it would really help with climate, let us generate electricity without any greenhouse gases.
I have a quote from you on climate from the annual letter, and I think it's pretty good. I read quotes back to people from their own speeches a lot, but this is something you wrote. Tackling climate change is going to demand historic levels of global cooperation. Is that, I guess, one of the biggest challenges of climate change? I mean, there's always ways to innovate in tech and innovate in other fields, but is the cooperation of all these companies that all have to chip in to make a difference one of the biggest challenges?
Yes, the getting to zero means all the countries going along in all the different sectors of emissions. So
Right.
It's not enough if you just do passenger cars.
Right.
Even that's super hard and very important, but you also have to do industrial and agriculture and other forms of transport like planes and long distance trucks. And so the number of innovations is very, very high. And in some of these areas, the green approach will still cost more than the dirty approach. And so convincing people that the benefits of stopping these emissions mean that you should be willing to pay extra for some of these activities.
Right.
If we get super good innovation, in a few cases, we might get the green premium, I call it, to zero, so that you don't pay any extra. But because there's so many sources of emissions, some of them will be premium priced, and yet we have to go to 194 countries and get almost all of them, particularly the big ones, to go along, or else the motivation for the others falls apart and the whole thing fails.
And on that same theme, the premium of something that might be considered better or cleaner for the environment, we spoke about Tesla briefly last time, and I think what you mentioned basically was they have a great product, but they're still premium, it's still more expensive to get one, which is why it's not everywhere. Do you think that if that problem is solved, that could be one of the more important things towards advancing an advent of sustainable transport? Like, that's one of the most important things for that company and eventually for the entire industry, is to bring the premium down to hopefully zero, so that it's a no-brainer to go electric or zero emissions.
Yeah, the premium today is there, but over the next decade, except that the range will still be a little bit less, that premium will come to zero. So if we take all the sectors, passenger cars is actually one of the most hopeful. And certainly Tesla, if you had to name one company that's helped drive that, it's them. Now, all the car companies, including some other new ones,
Getting in
are
on it.
moving super fast to do electric cars. Actually,
Yeah.
the biggest concern is, will the consumers
Get on board.
overcome their range anxiety? I just got a Porsche Taycan, which is an electric car.
Okay.
And I have to say, it's a premium price car, but
Yeah.
it is very, very cool. That's my first electric car, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, I have to follow up on that because that's a car I'm super curious about. You don't see them nearly as much, but one you see pretty much everywhere is Tesla Model 3.
Yes.
I see them all over Seattle, you see them all over downtown, and if you're in LA. Is there anything like missing from that experience? Obviously it's a fun car, but other than getting the price down and continuing to make a better product, is there any other reason not to go electric, I guess?
Well, the range, if you
Okay.
want to go a long distance,
Right.
the pervasiveness of recharging, the time to recharge,
Yeah.
compared to filling up a tank of gas, the amount of energy that's going in, per minute of filling your gas tank is kind of mind-blowing.
a lot.
Gasoline is very dense energy, 30 times more dense than the current lithium batteries. And now a factor of 2 improvement in the range will get it so most people, it's only less than 3% of car sales
Right now.
globally today. Norway is higher than that, and China's looks to be one of the markets that will develop the most quickly. So price will. It's important for that to come down. Of course, you spend a little bit less on the electricity than you would spend on gasoline, and the maintenance cost is a little bit less. Although the insurance right now is a little bit more.
Still premium cars or premium insurance.
Yeah, and the repairs on like these mirrors that are really rich and complicated.
Yeah.
Fixing a mirror used to be $100. Now it's like $1,500. So, there's some work to be done on a few of these areas, but clearly, of all the climate areas, I'd say that one's the most hopeful.
For sure. It's the way of the future, I say. All right, so as a YouTuber, I feel like I have to ask about YouTube. And, with all the work you've done with not only spreading vaccines for as many people as possible, but there's also kind of the second job of spreading information about vaccines. You mentioned in the annual letter people who are hundreds of meters from somewhere where they could have gotten a vaccine and didn't. What do you think about the role of sites like YouTube in the spread of not just information, but potentially misinformation when it comes to things like vaccines or climate change?
Yeah, it's very tricky because historically the newspapers or the media were very responsible about not letting untruths about vaccine safety get out there. Now, it's, you don't want to get rid of the good thing, which is that anybody can publish.
Right.
The barriers to entry, the diversity of voices is so phenomenal compared to traditional publishing.
Right. I feel like, and you have a bit of a YouTube presence, so you're able to share information about things through social media. It's kind of a social media age, so I feel like that ideally helps your cause more than it hurts it.
Yeah, my audience probably isn't deep with the vaccine doubters.
Okay, fair,
but I in a creative way, trying to get positive messages to be interesting, and we have work to do on that. I would have thought, using experts and scientific knowledge, that all the internet would just make it so much easier to learn about things, and yet in some ways, people aren't seeking out complex information, particularly if it disagrees with some preconceived notion that they have. So, how can social media get out there and be a little bit of a force for education, particularly on climate, where without a consensus, we won't do the hard things that will save things for the next generation.
So we want to push the information that helps the most amount of people to as many people as possible. That's one version of swinging for the fences.
Yeah, and activate. People want to do more than just make their salary. They want to be involved with the cause. And for a lot of people, some way of engaging either as a consumer, an advocate, a donor in climate change, that I'm amazed at how the interest level is going up. I hope it's not a cyclical thing. I hope that's kind of a permanent thing, because the challenge requires decades of it being a very top issue, as opposed to, okay, for 3 or 4 years that was kind of interesting, let's move on to something else.
All right, last question. And this is inspired by Nilay Patel, who has interviewed you before from The Verge, which is just a total tech question. As a person as busy as yourself, when do you do email?
I do some on the phone. I do a lot. I'm a very PC-centric person.
Okay.
I sit at my desk with a nice big Surface screen.
Nice.
And I get in early to do email, a lot at night. Particularly if I get a long email, I'll mark it as unread. And then that night I'm going through the last few days, looking at what I marked as unread and said, okay, that's got an enclosure.
Right.
Let's really go through that, give a thoughtful response to it. I do know if I overschedule myself, the symptom of that is I'm starting to fall behind on email. I'm not
Same.
super responsive, and that that can be a bad thing. Today I got mail about this coronavirus outbreak and
Yep.
how should the foundation step up and do something. I'm glad I was there to give a really quick yes response.
Yes, definitely.
Some things are urgent, and but it's a gauge of am I managing my schedule well, that people feel like I'm quick to reply.
I try to be quick to reply, but we can't always be. Thank you again for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
And,
great to see you.
Good to see you again. Hopefully do it again sometime.
Excellent.